it should really be based upon the informed choices of the people who have to get the vaccine or are being forced to. So fundamentally, we need to return those rights of consent back to the people where they belong.
Hello, Texans for Vaccine Choice. I'm Rebecca Hardy, the president, and I am delighted to bring our special guest today, Mitch Little, Republican nominee for House District 65. Welcome. May I call you Mitch?
Please do.
Okay.
Yes, I've been called a lot of things, but that's the one that you can call me today.
Wonderful.
Yeah, good to see you.
Well, welcome. Well, you just a couple of months ago won a hard primary, and so with that, my first question is just, running for office is not for the faint of heart, especially for such a high-profile position. So tell us a little bit about what made you want to run.
Yeah, so good question. My wife had the same question. You know, when you decide that you're thinking about running for office, it's obviously a good idea to have conversations with people that you know and care about. And my wife and I probably had 10 or 12 of those before I made the decision to run. And I think what kind of lit the fuse for me for deciding to run for office was seeing the dysfunction that was going on in the Texas legislature. And by dysfunction, I mean really the transactional nature of politics, people not voting their values, people voting with and supporting a leadership regime that didn't have the best interests of the grassroots at heart. And when I got down to Austin representing Ken Paxton in the impeachment proceeding, I kind of got a front row seat to what that looks like in the legislature, seeing a process that really wasn't supportable by law. You know, Attorney General was denied due process, and I thought as I was down there, first of all, I need to win this in order to have a chance to ever do something like that, to run for office. But second of all, I felt like I could do something about it, like I could really make a difference in how things are done there. And I think by God's good grace in March and with the runoffs, I think we're getting to a place where there may actually be some change in the Texas House.
Yes. Well, wonderful. I know. And, you know, I watched a little bit of the Paxton impeachment, and it just was it was a real eye-opener to so many Texans on just how dysfunctional things can be. I mean, it woke up a lot of people, and I loved watching you and Tony. I mean, it was a remarkable. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
At one point in the trial, this is probably about the second week, I turned to Tony Busby and I said, "Is this not the most fun you've ever had in your entire life?" And Tony looked back at me and he said, "No, this is not the most fun I've ever had in my entire life." And then another day I looked at Dan Cogdell and I said, "Is this not the most fun you've ever had in your entire life?" And he goes, "No, this is not the most fun I've ever had in my entire life." For me, it was the most fun I've ever had in my entire life and the most scared that I've ever been. So it was, you know, when I got back home from the trial, I came home to my twins' 13th birthday party with about 70 seventh graders, boys and girls, for a dance party. I came straight back from the impeachment trial to chaperoning that. And it probably took me a good week to come down from all the adrenaline of just being hyper vigilant in a trial for 2 weeks, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that it had the outcome that it did. But it's a unique aspect of Texas history now, and hopefully one that's not repeated anytime soon.
I agree. Amen. Okay, so there's always fun and interesting, maybe odd or even scary stories that come from the campaign trail. So I like to ask, is there a story from the campaign trail, either from block walking or poll greeting or what have you, that you'd like to share? A standout story.
I have an endless list of those. I'll share a few of them with you. You know, when I lived at Carrollton Public Library during early voting for 2 weeks, and there was kind of an endless parade of current incumbent state reps from other parts of the state that were coming into campaign against me 15 feet away from me. And that is a kind of a bizarre experience. I also had over $1 million spent against me on broadcast television. So lawyers that I knew from other districts that couldn't even vote for me were seeing ads about me on TV and texting me like, hey, you wouldn't believe what's on my TV about you right now. And I said, yeah, I think I would believe it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a strange experience. But the story I love to tell is during early voting in the weeks leading up to the election, I was getting up in the morning and going to bed at night, and I felt like the Lord was telling me 57-43, 57-43. And we had polling, and I thought, I'm not ahead by that much in the polling, so I don't know what, Lord, if you're telling me something, I don't know what you're telling me right now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't going away. And so on election day, I was at First Baptist Church of Justin. The polls closed. I get in the car, and my wife calls me, and she says, how are you doing? And I said, I'm doing fine. How are you doing? She says, fine. She says, have you seen the early voting results? And I said, no, I just got in the car. She says, well, you're losing. She said, you're losing 51-48. And I said, Kelly, I'm sorry. I may have just let us all down here.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I talked to your campaign manager. She says it's going to be a long night. And so by 11 o'clock, as the voting day results started to come in, that lead started to shrink with each release of votes. And by about 11 o'clock at night, we crossed over in front by about 100 votes. And by midnight, we had won. And so we're hugging, celebrating, crying, all that. And I come back to the house, and I'm flipping through social media, and a guy that lives in my district, I caught a tweet that he made, and he said, you wouldn't believe this, Mitch Little won election day 57-43.
Oh.
It was, and obviously I give God all the glory for that. It was truly a miracle. I can't take any credit for it. And I set out at the beginning to have lots of endorsements. A lot of them were too scared to endorse me, or didn't for various reasons. And had every disadvantage, financial disadvantage, et cetera, running against an incumbent. So I have to give God all the glory for it, honestly. That's my favorite story.
Amen. That's a great story. Well, you're no stranger to the Capitol building now. Maybe you were prior to the impeachment.
Yeah.
You're no stranger to the Capitol.
Can at least find my way around a little bit now.
Oh, it is a maze. I mean, I still get lost, and
I was embarrassed. The first 2 or 3 days of the trial, I was embarrassed. I got lost several times.
Easy to do. Let that be a note to all of you advocates that are like, oh, I couldn't go. The Capitol's too crazy of a maze.
Yeah.
Listen. Even the seasoned advocates get lost. So just lean into the being lost and you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's right.
So you are no stranger to the Capitol. With that in mind, what do you think is something that you'll be able to contribute that's new or different?
Yeah, your organization has achieved so many wins on the backs of your advocacy and the people who have served and given and donated. You've already made a significant dent in what I'll call the vaccine mandates. So, you have one side of the equation saying, hey, we resolved vaccine mandates. Those don't exist anymore, but you and I both know that they do.
Yes.
And from my perspective, the piece of that was left out that was most significant were the student mandates. Because I know you have young daughters in school. I have young daughters in school. And I'm trying to imagine the Hobson's choice that a young woman is faced with if she's going to nursing school or going to medical school, and she's being forced to take an mRNA gene therapy treatment that may or may not have an effect on fertility, things like that. And so I don't think a student should ever have to be faced with the choice of choosing between their dream and their potential future as a wife, a mother. That piece of it being left off is kind of shocking to me.
Yeah.
And we both know why. It's because medical schools, the medical industry wants to be able to retain control over its environment. But I think if we're going to truly ensure that no mandates exist, those vulnerable people, that vulnerable population needs to be protected. So that's certainly something I would like to help play a role in. Rebecca, one of the things that I think is most significant about what's going on in the legislature right now is the turnover of leadership. And I am a firm believer that if the head is healthy, the body's going to be healthy. If the head is sick, the body's going to be sick. And right now we have a leadership body in the Texas House that doesn't communicate well, doesn't lead well, hasn't led with the best interests of the party and the grassroots at its core. And so I think we are on the verge of making a very significant change to the leadership structure of the House that I think is going to benefit all Texans, including you and me.
Wonderful. Well, good. And I would even say, would you support that to go beyond just the COVID vaccine? I mean, we still have our medical students are under all sorts of mandates with vaccines beyond the COVID vaccine, and this is the stuff that keeps me up at night, because why, just by the mere career path you're choosing, do you not get the same, informed consent rights as the rest of the populace?
It's very disturbing. We govern with the consent of the governed, and I think fundamentally Texans don't want someone like me, or a bureaucrat, or someone in charge at a hospital, or someone in charge at a medical school, to be able to determine their healthcare future. And it should really be based upon the informed choices of the people who have to get the vaccine, or are being forced to. So fundamentally, we need to return those rights of consent back to the people where they belong.
Wonderful. We love to hear it, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, and you were recommended by TFEC, but you filled out our survey. You made a very strong commitment, as you are currently during this interview, to advance the cause of the issues of medical liberty. How do you see yourself contributing to the advancement, just practically at the Capitol?
Yeah, good question. So I'm learning a lot. This is, since March, I think this is one of those times in my life where I've had to really absorb a lot of information very quickly and build a lot of relationships very quickly. I think where you'll see me as a lawyer with a legal background is someone who's going to be scrutinizing the potential outcomes for our most vulnerable citizens. So we all come from a particular frame of reference and background. So I've got 3 kids at home who are under 18. They're 13, and about to be 10. And so every decision we make from a medical freedom standpoint is going to have a very real impact on their lives, okay? If you took, like, my dad's generation as an example, people in their 70s who may or may not make a vaccine choice, like when we're dealing with COVID. I know a lot of older folks said, well, I need to get the vaccine. I'm the most vulnerable. And they went out and did it. But they're not so much concerned with things like fertility. They're not so much concerned with the externalities of taking a vaccine that are extremely relevant to somebody who's, say, a young athlete, someone who hasn't had any babies yet, someone who hasn't lived most of their adult life. And that's the frame of reference that I come from. How do I protect my children and their future so that we ensure that they have the same life experiences, opportunity to have the same life experiences as the generations that went ahead of them? So as a lawyer with a young family, that's the context that I come from, and I think that's something that I kind of contribute. Rebecca, one of the things that I think we're seeing in America right now is a lot of skepticism about mRNA vaccines, and Texas and other states are starting to look at them from the standpoint of violation of the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, because the federal government has granted the developers of those mRNA technologies a very wide-ranging immunity, but they're not immune from everything. And so I think the right legal tack to take with it is to approach it from a deceptive trade practices standpoint and say, how is this thing marketed to the public? How is it marketed in a way to get people to adopt it and take it? How is it marketed to physicians who are actually, have financial incentives to get their practices to absorb the vaccine? There's still what I would call a large public accounting that needs to be had for how that was treated in 2020 and beyond. I mean, how do you see it?
I see that a lot of people need to be in jail. That's how
Yeah.
I see it, if
Yeah.
I'm being very, very blunt. And if the COVID response did anything, it just shined this massive light on just how much undue influence Big Pharma has on nearly every aspect of our lives. I mean, we had this coordinated effort with the pharmaceutical companies, with the media companies, with all of the tech companies. I mean, it was a coordinated effort to silence voices, censor any dissenting opinions, and coerce and manipulate people to take this vaccine that has no liability. And from all that I'm reading, they completely were deceptive, to use the word, in how they were marketing it. They knew the risks and they hid him.
I think one of the things that people have been exposed to from 2020 and beyond in a way that my generation had not been. I was born in 1979. So this 2020 marked an event in my lifetime where the coercive power of the state was revealed in a way that it had not been before. What are the tools that the state has, the federal government has, to coerce the public to do certain things? Everything from masks to the vaccine, et cetera. And I think you're seeing a generation that's being transformed in terms of its skepticism of belief in federal government and what it's telling us. One of the things that it has been extremely disturbing to me, and I'm sure it is to you too, is the testing concerning the efficacy of the vaccine and how deceptively that was performed at the outset, and the amount of marketing dollars that were designed to drive or propel its effectiveness forward when the data just simply didn't exist in the way that they said it did.
And not only did the data not exist, but they tried to hide it for 70 some odd years. And so it's just, all of it is, like I said, some people need to go to jail for a very long time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's some heaviness there. Let's maybe pivot to something a little bit lighter. Just to wrap up, I know you've got to get to court, Mitch, but what do you think would be the gold standard of a legislative approach to vaccinations, just in general?
Yeah, informed consent on the part of the public. And so I think what we need to stop doing is we need to stop carving out industries from that type of freedom and consent. So I think legislators, this is my observation, okay? My observation is that there is an entire segment of legislators for whom their job is transactional. I want to achieve a goal, and I need to trade something to achieve that goal. And so instead of achieving the entire goal, well, we'll let little trade groups or lobbies pick pieces off of it along the way. So you take the topic of vaccine choice, rather than, you take a look at all the work that Brian Harrison was doing on the bill to try to ensure that mandates went away. Lobbies were allowed to kind of pick off pieces of that vaccine choice. Students at medical schools, students at universities, nursing students. And what happens is we kind of allow the ideologues to claw off pieces of that freedom or bill on its way to adoption. And we really need to take an ideological stand and prevent that. And just say, no, we're not going to do it. It's either all going to pass or it's not going to pass. And stop compromising our values on the way to the goal. I think one of the things I'm observing about the world of politics and the world of the legislature is that when people make small compromises, it makes it easier to make the next one. And until you wake up 10, 20, 30 years later and your values are not what they were when you started. Does that resonate with you?
That definitely resonates. I mean, that can be applied to anyone in anywhere.
Any industry, any aspect of life. But it's sad because you can only give away so many pieces of yourself. And so I think and this is easy for me to say because I haven't had to serve in the legislature yet. And I've been practicing law for 20 years doing something entirely different. But you come in with the right ideals, and the problem is that people start to exchange their ideals for something that may or may not have value. I talked to a legislator the other day. He said, yeah, I made such and such was a dumb vote in the last session. I'm like, what do you mean? He says, well, I made this dumb vote in order to get this thing over here. And he started to explain to me what the thing was that he made the dumb vote to get, and he never actually got the thing that he wanted in the end anyway. So once this relationship with the people of Texas becomes transactional, and it loses its efficacy, I think.
Those are some wise words. Well, as we wrap up, do you have any final words for our TFBC listeners, Mitch?
I'm just very thankful for the support of your organization and the people who support you. You guys, and your advocacy in my race was such a blessing. Your endorsement was a blessing. Everybody that I've met that's associated with your organization is principled and really believes in what they're doing, and you can tell by the amount of effort that you put into it. Also, one of the beautiful things about your organization is taking a principled stance often comes at a cost, a relational cost, a cost in the community, and I just believe that when you take a principled stand, it's always worth it because you can lay your head to the pillow at night and know that you are doing the right thing.
Amen. I strongly agree with you. Thank you for those kind words. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mitch Little, Republican nominee for HD 65, thank you so much for being here
Thank
today.
you for inviting me. It's wonderful.
Thank you for listening to the Shot Callers podcast. Please, if you found value in this content, rate us and share the podcast with a friend. It's a great way to get the message out and to empower everyone to make informed decisions. Until next time, never forget, we are the Shot Callers.